Kia ora koutou, and welcome to my talk on how to use a strategy check as a prompt for independence in reading and writing. And firstly, I would like to thank Nikki Daly, who taught me this over 20 years ago. She was a mentor to me, and I learned so much from Nikki, and she talked to me about how to use this, and I've been using it in my teaching ever since. And the idea of the strategy check is that it's the way to really get the children to articulate the strategies that they need to use themselves when they're reading and writing, rather than the teacher constantly sitting there saying, get your mouth ready, look at the word, go back and do it again. So when we teach someone to read, those are the kinds of prompts we give children. But how long do you want to give those prompts before they start doing it themselves? Well, this will speed up the process. So we're going to get the student to articulate the strategies they're going to use before they start reading. Now, the strategies they're going to use, I'm going to link these to the strategies of the Searchlight model. So if we have a look at the Searchlight model here, which if you've been on my courses before, this will be familiar to you. So the Searchlight model explains what children need in order to come to literacy. So imagine if you can't read, and when you look at text, all you see are black squiggly lines. And what I want you to do is to turn on 4 searchlights in your brain. So when you look at those squiggly lines, you can decode them, make sense of them, read them. So when we do a strategy check, we're essentially turning on the searchlights in the brain before they start reading. And they're going to relate to each of these. They're going to relate to phonics. So can the student decode the word? To their graphic knowledge, is there a part of the word they know, or do they know the word? Grammar, is what they're reading sound right? Should they be rereading? And of course, context, is what they're reading making sense? So these are the searchlights we turn on the strategy check. Now, I'll do a strategy check whether I'm teaching reading, guided reading, or guided writing, and I've got a different strategy check for each one. I'll probably start with reading first, and I just want to remind you that when they're reading, we don't go straight into the strategy check. We're going to go into a book introduction. So when I start with my strategy check, when I start with my guided reading lesson before the strategy check, give that good book introduction. Even good readers need a good book introduction. So start with a conceptual overview. This is a story about a boy and his dad, and they go to the fun park and they go on heaps of rides, but someone doesn't cope with the rides very well. Who do you think that might go? It might be dad, and you might talk about it. And then you might go through and flag up any new words that you think might need to be pulled out before you read. And then just as you hand the students their guided reading book, just as their little hands are stretching forward, you go like this, freeze. I say, if you're reading this book, tell me 4 things that you can do if you get stuck on a word. And this is what I want them to say. And obviously, these are strategies I've taught the children before. So if I get stuck on a word, I can, let's see, what would be the first one? Get my mouth ready. So that's if your student is at stage 2 and they've been learning those first sounds. So if you're stuck on a word, look at the first letter, get your mouth ready, make the sound. But if your student is higher than stage 2, I might want the student to say, I can sound out the word, or I can robot the word. Or here's another thing they might say is, I'll get my thumb and I'll get the word with my thumb, which is basically decoding. I'll say, wow, great, that's using your phonics searchlight. What else can you do to help you get the word? And then they might say, well, I can look to see if I know the word, or there's a part of the word I know. Think of all the words there are that children don't know, but they actually do know parts of the word. Like today I was teaching and the student was stuck on today. And I said, I know you know that first bit. And he looked, he said 2. And I said, and he worked out the rest was day, looked at the D and he realized it would make sense. So that's the next thing, the graphic knowledge searchlight. Are they able to use, that visual memory to help them get to the word? So, okay, so the first thing they've said is they've sounded out or get their mouth ready, phonics searchlight. Next thing, look at the word. Do I know the word? Do I know a part of the word? That's the graphic knowledge. So we've got 2 searchlights turned on. The next searchlight, of course, is grammar. I can reread it, go back. And often when they go back to the start of the sentence, have another run, using that use of the structure or the grammar can help them get the word as well. And then the final searchlight is use their context. Think what will make sense. At this point, they might want to use the picture or think about the meaning. For example, if my dog was hungry, so I gave the dog could be a bone or a biscuit, and then you would look at the visual information to help you get the word. So that's how my students will articulate. So the students are saying this in the strategy check. I've coached them to articulate the strategies. And then when we're actually in guided reading and hearing the children read to me, if someone is stuck, you know how they look at you with those big eyes, instead of me saying, hey, well, go back to the beginning or look at the picture or sound out the word, instead of me saying that, I'll say, hey, you told me what you could do. What could you do? I might say, I could sound it out. And I'll go, okay, go on then. Or they might sound it out. Maybe they'll get the first bit. I'll say, okay, what else can you do? Could you reread? Okay, go on then. So my role then becomes encouraging them to do what I have taught them to do, and not just being the person who's constantly saying ad nauseum, get your mouth ready, sound it out, think about what makes sense, reread it, look at the word, a part of that word, So we want them to articulate the strategies. So that's how I use a strategy check for reading. And it's very fast. It's just really quick before they start the actual reading and before the book introduction. Well, what about writing? So what happens in writing? So let's think about guided writing. And let's think about the steps in guided writing. And you may have seen my video, how to teach children to write who can't write yet. So you might have seen that video, and you'll know that the structure I use for teaching guided writing is the first step is composition. Second step is holding structure. So after they've come up with this story, I want them to maybe clap it out 2 or 3 times to make sure they've got it in their heads. And then the third step is writing. But just before that third step, I'll say to the tamariki, and again, these are strategies that I've taught them, they're familiar with. I say, what will you do if you get stuck on spelling a word in your story today? And what I want them to say is, let's use the phonics searchlight first. I can write the sound. I can get a sound that I can hear, which would be stage 2, or if they're stage 4, phonics or higher, they might say, I can robot the word, or if it's a big word, I can clap it out and break it down and get all the sounds in those bits. I say, okay, great, that's stage, that's phonics. What else can you do? And then they might say something like, I can use a word list, use my dictionary. Think if there's any part of the word I know, like in today, they might know 2, and then all they have to do is use their phonics to get today. I say, great, that's 2 things you can do. And then I'll say to them, but what will you do if you forget what you're writing? That's a really common problem for a lot of tamariki. They start writing, then halfway through they forget their sentence. So what can you do if you forget what you're writing? I can reread it. That's turning on the grammar searchlight. And what will you do to make sure that what you have written is right? I can reread it to make sure it makes sense. So rereading works on structure as well as context. I said, wow, those are really good things that are going to help your writing. And, as I said, it will help your grammar and your context as well. And then I said, well, start writing then. And then as they're writing, if they're stuck on, say, a word and they don't know how to spell it, they look at you with those big eyes, and you can say, hey, you told me what you would do if you get stuck in a word. What can you do? Oh, I can sound it. Okay, you do that then. So we're encouraging them to do what it is we've been teaching them to do in the phonics lessons, modeling in the shared writing. We're saying, now you do it, and you can support them through it, remembering you don't want them, you don't want to necessarily push them to do what you haven't taught yet. So if my students are only at stage 2, if they can give me 1 sound, I'm quite happy. If they're at stage 3, I want 2 sounds, at stage 4, 3 sounds, and so on. Right, so from then on, it's about them doing it. And if they forget, I actually do write the children's stories down. So if they forget, I do have it. I say, well, reread it before I tell you. See if you can remember it when you reread it. So that's pushing the child to use structure. But I want them to say that they can reread it. My job is to say, well, what are you going to do? Tell me, what do you think you should do? You want them to articulate the strategies. So let's have a look at that in action. I've got some photos here of a guided reading lesson. This is a one-on-one lesson with an older student, low progress reader. So you can see here I am in the book introduction, and how you know that is I'm holding the book. So I'm holding the book because I'm introducing the book, the concept, flagging up any tricky words, and the student is engaged and we're having a conversation. And now the student's holding the book, but he hasn't opened it because we're doing the strategy check. And I'm saying, hey, what are you going to do then if you get stuck when you're reading? Come on, I've got my 4 fingers to say, right, first I can sound it out. Number 1. What else? Look to see if there's a part of the word I know. Maybe I know the number 2. What else? Reread it. Yeah, what else? Think what makes sense. Look at the picture. Oh, wow, you've got 4 things that you can do when you're stuck. So we just quickly articulate or get him to articulate the strategy. And also, like, this is one-on-one, but I do this in a group as well. Here the child is doing the reading. Note the worried look on my face. Is he going to read? And then he uses one of the strategies and go, you nailed it. You got it. So and then you praise them for doing what it is that they said they were going to do in the strategy check. So teachers, that's how you can use a strategy check as a prompt for independence to get the students articulating the strategies. And then our job is to encourage them to use them and to praise them for using them. So I hope that will help you with your guided reading and writing.